Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for another edition of vBrownbag. I'm your host, Tom Green, and it's my pleasure tonight to present compliance remediation with vRealize Orchestrator, and we'll be hosting John Diaz. John is a vRealize expert, and he's going to lead us through using Orchestrator and operations to make sure you're compliant. But first, we need to talk about a little housekeeping. vBrownbag is a very interactive, real-time platform. We monitor at vBrownbag and the various international hashtags and Twitter handles all the time. You can engage with us at any point by hitting hashtag vBrownbag. There's always dozens of people monitoring that. If you want to see the latest and greatest schedule, go to vbrownbag.com/brownbags, and it is updated at least a couple of times a month. With all that out of the way, I'll pass control over to you, John, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Tom, very much. My name is John Diaz. I'm a Senior Technical Marketing Manager with the Cloud Management Business Unit at VMware. And my job is basically to create enablement, technical demos, slides, videos, you name it, for our vRealize Operations product. Tom, can you see my screen? It should be vRealize Operations Quick Start.
I can.
Okay, all right, cool. So we've been busy with the 7.5 of vRealize Operations Manager, which just launched. It's actually just went GA last week. So hopefully you've had time to read about that, or maybe even hopefully get your hands on it and get it in your own lab to play around with. I've done 4 blogs on the VMware blog, the management blog, about the release technical overview. It's a 4-part series, and so there's a lot of content. This was really a big payload for a vRealize Operations release. There's a lot of good stuff in there. Tonight, what I want to talk about, or what I've been invited to talk about with you all, is some of the new capabilities we have around compliance, and specifically remediation of compliance alerts through the vRealize Orchestrator Management Pack. Now, the vRealize Orchestrator Management Pack, and I'll just show you, kind of where that sits in product, sits with the rest of the solutions. Basically, you download it as a pack file, and you can install it in your environment just like you would any other solution. The version I have here is actually not 7.5 that I'm running. I'll switch later to a 7.5 version, but I wanted to show you like unconfigured version so we can step through the configuration process, and then I'll go, kind of cooking show style. I'll go to one that's already been set up and everything, and then we'll continue on. But it's basically a solution. This is actually the 2.0 version. We released a 3.0 version, which you'll see in the other system that I have running, that comes out of the box with workflows for compliance remediation for ESXi hosts against the vSphere Security Configuration Guide version 6.7, 6.5, and 6.7. It'll work with both of those. So that's really what I'm going to be showing specifically. But I think when we get through this, what you'll see is the ability, especially if you have some skills with Orchestrator already, where you can take that and expand into other, not only compliance remediation, but other alert auto remediation, like runbook automation for alerts for restarting virtual machines, or restarting services on virtual machines, taking snapshots, reverting to snapshots. a lot of different things that you can do that may be based on orchestrator workflows. So the sky is really the limit. Once we open up that action framework in vRealize operations to basically any custom workflow in vRealize Orchestrator, there's really potentially no limit to what you can do. And there's also been some contributions already. I started on Sample Exchange. I started actually a repository for the workflows that you could contribute, or you can actually check out what you need to do. I'll show you the hard way to get, not the hard way, but the longer way to get to it, going through the Sample Exchange directly, and then I'll show you how you can get to it directly from our microsite. But if you go to Sample Exchange, you click on vRealize Operations Manager as the platform, and then you go down and select VRO Workflow. What you'll see are, well, since I'm not logged in, it won't show me. What you would normally see are a couple of workflow packages that have already been contributed by folks in the community that will work with the Orchestrator Management Pack for vRealize Operations. I don't know why that is not showing. Oh, it's probably a VRO package. Let me try that. There we go.
So real quick, John, which of the solution packs will work with the standard edition, if any? So you're showing tonight?
So, yeah, so you will need advanced edition or enterprise to use this. So that is a requirement for this particular feature.
All right, cool, thanks.
Yeah. So anyway, so there are 3 different ones that have been uploaded by well, there's one from me, just some samples, but there's also someone's taken the initiative in the community here to actually create additional workflows for resolving virtual machine violations of the security hardening guide. And it also covers, like you can see here, STIG findings and so forth. So there's already people creating content, adding content to this that you can use as well. So what I'll show you is what VMware provides out of the box in that solution. And then, but this just shows you that you can expand on that. So I want to make sure you're aware of that. Oh, and by the way, the easy way to get to that is if you go to vRealize at vmware.com, which is our microsite. We've got a banner here for the vRealize Operations Sample Exchange. It's got the dashboard samples that come up, but it's also got a filter as soon as it loads here that will show you the orchestrator workflows. So we're looking at all samples now. If I just wanted to see the VRO workflows that work with that, then I can get to them from here. It's a little bit easier to use. We are adding another sample exchange tag for vRealize Operations. Just want to plug that real quick while I have time. But we're doing supermetrics. So I've already uploaded 2 sample supermetrics to the repository. So this is another thing that kind of coincided with the launch of vRealize Operations 7.5 because we did enhance the supermetric editor and we added on-the-fly supermetrics as well. And we can cover that in another session. But anyway, be sure to check that out. I'm not gonna promote any more of our stuff on here, but I think people will find that helpful. Anyway. Okay, so you download that the solution from the marketplace, like you would any solution, and then click on the Add button to basically browse to the solution and install the pack file. I kind of have that done already just to make it easier because it takes 10 minutes or so, depending on the size of your cluster and everything, to go out. And the next thing you'll do, and I'm assuming that you have an orchestrator instance stood up somewhere in your environment. Obviously, that is required for the orchestrator management pack, and it can be a standalone orchestrator, or it could be a cluster, or it can be a VRA, the embedded instance that comes in the VRA appliance. So both of those are supported. I'm going to set it up here with 7.5, but I have it working. I believe I've got 7.6 in the other lab that I'll show you. So it does work with the newer release of Orchestrator that was just released last week, along with all the other vRealize goodness. So when you have it installed, you just come to this gear icon, which is the configure icon, and click it. And here you can add an adapter instance, and you'll basically just point to your orchestrator. So I'll just give it a friendly name here of Orchestrator. And then the IP or FQDN, so 173 in my case, I believe it was 48. The port 8281 is the default port here. I don't know if it gives you the hint for that. No, it just tells you the FQDN or IP address. But that's the only thing where if you're not familiar with using Orchestrator, it's like what is the port? You could easily Google it, but 8281 is the port. The auto discovery, you'll leave that turned to true by default, and I'll explain why as I go through and we look at more of the configuration that you would do as kind of a follow-on to this. But leave that at true for now, and then for the credential, let me just show you if I add a new credential. I've already got one in here that was created. You have a choice. You can do a credential based on just native vRealize Orchestrator. If it's a vRealize Automation Embedded Orchestrator instance, then you would obviously select that one instead. So I'm going to do the vRealize Orchestrator credential. You just put a friendly name for the credential name, and then your username and password to log in. And in my case, like I said, I've already got it set up. So I'll use the one that is in here. And just to show you what that looks like, you can see that it's just my AD credential because I have it set up to work with my vCenter to handle the login through AD. So as I'm a vCenter user, this is a valid ID for me to use my AD credentials there in the lab. That's it.
Just as the best practices tick and my neck starts going, whatever, using AD for setting up one of those in production is probably not what you want to do, or at least not using a AD account, not a service account, right?
Yeah, no, exactly right. Okay. So I would probably go with a service account. Yeah, that is that's definitely. I get away with a lot of stuff in my lab that you should not do. And
I just wanted to make sure that as we went through that, to point out AD service accounts are great. If you don't want to have a bad time, don't use an account with an expiring password.
Exactly. So yeah, definitely want to do service account for that. Then I'll test the connection. It'll just, let me know that I was able to, connect to that on the correct, and the port's correct, and so forth. For the advanced settings, there's not really a lot there. There's just basically the which collector group. So you don't really need to worry about that. Once you're done, you just save the settings, and it'll actually test the adapter instance again, but then it'll save it, and then you can close. Now, within a few minutes, this will start collecting. One of the things that happens is a dashboard gets installed. So if you look under the dashboards tab, there's a new dashboard called the vRealize Orchestrator Workflows Overview. And in that dashboard initially, you'll probably see, at least before it starts collecting, you'll get some gray question marks just because we're starting to just collect from this new instance. So there's no need to panic there unless it's been like 30 minutes or something and you're still getting that. Then there could be a problem. But what this is really useful for is the additional components that you need to install on the orchestrator instance. Now, before I go down that road, let me pop over to the orchestrator client and show you what happens on the orchestrator side. So here's my orchestrator instance that I connected to. And when you activate that configuration, when you add that adapter instance, what happens is a package is installed in orchestrator by that adapter instance, and it's this VROps OOB, stands for out of the box content. Okay, so yeah, we provide a set of workflows as examples for you to use with this in case you need examples or you don't have your own set of workflows or something like that. And they're pretty useful. You can browse through these. I'll point out a couple. We'll run a couple from the UI later just to show you. But so you get those installed by default, and you don't really have to do anything to take advantage of those. Initially, they're there. So you don't really need to do anything else in Orchestrator. The only other thing that I would do while you're in Orchestrator poking around is, if you haven't already, go ahead and set up your vCenter endpoint. So we'll go to the vCenter folder in the library and go to configuration. And I've actually already done it, but you would want to add a vCenter server instance workflow. And when you run that workflow, basically it's going to ask you for, connection information, credential information. Again, Tom's point about service accounts is something you should probably observe here as well. But following this workflow, very easy to answer the questions here. Once you have that set up and that workflow run is successful, as it was for me when the last time I ran it, I had a couple of failures along the way. If you go to the inventory tab, just make sure that you can browse to that vCenter server and you can browse to the objects in there. That also lets you know that this is set up and running correctly. So if I'm able to browse down to the virtual machines and see virtual machines, in my environment, I know that I'm good to go. So we'll go back to the vRealize operations, the orchestrator dashboard we were looking at. And one of the things that is going to be handy when you're using this is this little action icon in this particular widget, right? So the selection widget, if it's not visible already, it should be, but if the toolbar is not visible, just click on that eye icon to make it visible. And then you can pull down the action menu. And there are 4 actions on the action menu. There's add a vCenter server instance to vRealize Orchestrator. Well, what that does is it actually allows you to run the workflow that I just pointed out in Orchestrator to add a vCenter server instance. It allows you to run it directly from here. So you don't have to go out and run it, but I do find it easier to do it there versus in here because you can then go and validate that it is configured properly and working. And I recommend that just because it's just a good practice. It'll save you some frustration and time if something's not working right, and then you go back and you realize, oh, that the vCenter server wasn't added properly or something like that. It'll just save you a little time. But you certainly can run it from here. You just select the vCenter server that you want from the pull-down list. I only have one in the environment, and then you just fill in, all the other, answer all the other questions as you would in the orchestrator workflow itself. So that's that. Once that's done, then the next thing is that you'll want to take a look at is configuring the package discovery. Now remember, we had set package discovery to auto, or the automatic package discovery to true, I should say, in the adapter instance. So what that does is that looks at this list of packages, orchestrator packages, and these are input by default. And so it just goes out and it says, okay, all the workflows in those packages are ones that I'm going to enable for you to be able to import as actions into Orchestrator. And that'll be the next, into vRealize operations. And that'll be the next step that we go down, okay? But that's how you control which workflows are available to vRealize operations. So not all the workflows are available by default, just the ones in the vCenter folder in the library and the ones in that out-of-the-box content. Now, I will say this, and let's flip over back over to the Orchestrator client. When you look at these packages, you can see, I've got a lot of workflows here in the out-of-the-box, and then a lot of them are kind of the same as some that are in the vCenter package as well, right? And it'll populate here in a second. But it's a lot of workflows, right? So you end up with, kind of a lot of stuff that you may or may not use. And many of the workflows in the vCenter are not ready to run in Orchestrator, okay? And I'll explain that more as we get into like actually configuring the workflow to run and so forth. But just be aware, these aren't necessarily ready to go in terms of using them from the action menu in vRealize operations, okay? So what I recommend, going back to the package discovery, what I recommend just to kind of make things easy is comment that out and then do begin action, and then you're just stuck with, not stuck, then you're left with just those out of the box ones, which should all work without any modification or anything like that. And so that'll go out and discover all of the workflows that you've allowed for it to see. And then the next step at that point is to create or modify workflow action on vCenter resources. Now, I'm not terribly crazy about the wording on that, but once you understand what it is, I think it'll make sense to you. When I click on that, what it does is it pulls in a list of all the workflows based on that discovery setting and the packages that you've allowed for discovery. It pulls that in and it says, okay, well, which of these would you like to consume in vRealize operations? And the reason that you do that is because, for example, let's say I want to do something like remove sorry, my responsiveness is really slow for some reason. Remove CD-ROM, which would be a nice, or remove a floppy, which would be a nice kind of remediation action you could take. A lot of times if you're trying to do something with a virtual machine, move a virtual machine around or something like that, you find that you have problems because it's got a floppy attached or CD-ROM attached. So it's helpful to remove that kind of thing. I don't know. I may not have discovered everything just yet. Let me try a reverse. There we go. And you'll see some of them are like, with they have the VRO in front of them. Those are the out-of-the-box workflows that we provide with the pack. It's still got the other ones in there from the vCenter library, just because I just recently turned that off. It'll take about 5-10 minutes, a couple of cycles to remove those from the list, so make that list shorter. So you can see why it may be a good idea, another good idea to, you know, remove that from the discovery, is to kind of shorten this list. Anyway, I'll just select this one just to make it the flow move along here. But when you select it, then you can select the resource that the resource type that you want that to be available on. And so I'm clicking like a madman and nothing is happening. Let's see here. Oh, there we go. There's my list. Resource type. And in this case, it's upgrade tools. So obviously I want that to be available on a virtual machine. So I'll just go down, do virtual machine, and then the operation will be to add, okay? So once I begin this, next time I look at this list, it'll say available on resource type virtual machine, okay? Now, if I'd said available on resource type, and this is a workflow that works on virtual machines, if I were to say host or cluster or something like that, then it would be available for those, but it would still pull up the list of all the virtual machines when I run that action, so that I could run it on multiple machines. So just be aware of that, and you'll actually see how that works. I begin the action, and at this point, what will happen is that workflow will now be added to the actions, available actions in vRealize operations. So if I come here to actions, when you click on you know, a virtual machine, you go to the summary page for the virtual machine, or as we saw in that selection widget where we had that little gear icon and it pulled down an action menu. These are all the different actions that can be used. And a lot of these have been in the product for many years. They're part of the Python actions adapter. You've probably seen references to that, maybe not sure what that is, but they're Python scripts basically that can run those actions for you. They provide the automation, but now you can see that there are actions that are associated with the orchestrator adapter, for example, and like here's the one to add a vCenter server instance. That's just a workflow in Orchestrator that we've added as an action for the object type of vRealize Orchestrator adapter instance. Here's add a new VNIC to a virtual machine, okay? And so it is part of the actions, and it's actually been assigned to the virtual machine type, and it's actually also been tied to a couple of recommendations, right? So there are alert recommendations that you see when an alert triggers that tell you, make recommendations about what you should do, and in some cases, those have actions applied to them. And so that action to add another VNIC is based on a orchestrator workflow. So let's go look
John,
at
it. We have a question that came in.
Sure.
Are there any options for PowerShell scripting with this?
No, there are not directly. So there is a PowerShell plugin in Orchestrator, and you could certainly leverage that, but not directly from this action framework. That is actually a use case that I've been advocating for, and I know our product managers are interested in it. You know, hopefully we'll be able to get that. But the way to do that today would be to leverage the Orchestrator's PowerShell plugin to execute those PowerShell scripts for you. Okay, so you know what I'm talking about with these actions basically is if I go to a virtual machine, and this is my jump box in the lab, so you know if I break it, no worries, right? You see that add a new VNIC to virtual machine. There's that workflow. If I click on that, it'll pop up the inputs that are needed, but it automatically fills. Like one of the inputs is the VM, and one of the other inputs is the host system. So it automatically fills those in for you. It knows, vRealize Operations knows what those are because it understands relationships and so forth. So it's like, hey, we'll pre-fill that for you, the switch type. We'll give you, a selection list that you can choose from there. Hopefully there we go. We'll do distributed switch and so forth. And I'd have to go look up my port groups and so forth. So I'm not going to actually run this, but you can get an idea of, what you would be able to do with that action. So you can come in here, put these inputs in, begin the action, and it would just go out and it would run the orchestrator workflow. Same thing basically for any of these that you see here. You'll notice that there are some that have this brownish, gold, orangish icon. Those are the out-of-the-box workflows that we provide. When we go and add our own custom workflows, they'll show up with the same style of icon, but it'll be colored blue, so you can differentiate between which ones are out of the box and which ones are custom. But since we have enabled this integration is enabled, be aware that that action menu is now going to show the workflows that have been discovered and have been added through that process that we looked at earlier, so they can be added to this action framework and added to alert recommendations and so forth. So that's kind of the basics of the install process. Like I said, I just wanted to go over that to begin with. Again, this dashboard is kind of your friend. It's the easiest place to do it. The only other action on here is this important vRealize Operations Remediation package to VRO. The only time you would want to run that or need to run that is if you went in or somebody went in and deleted some of that out-of-the-box workflows, or they modified them, or they got corrupted somehow, then you could just run this and it'll just reinstall that package in Orchestrator for you, and just to make your life easier. I actually had to do this. I screwed up a couple of workflows a few weeks back, and this was a lifesaver for me. So that's what that last little action is for. Now, one thing I do want to point out about the workflows, and I mentioned that not all the workflows are able to be run out of the box using the VRO management pack. And what I mean by that is, for these workflows, and we'll just look at this one, I'll pick this VM power operation. The workflows, to be able to be run with using that management pack, need to have, sorry for this screen room here, they need to have a single, at least one input for the, that's actually a bad example there, migrate VM, for the object type. So there should be, sorry, I'm screwing this up. Go to host maintenance mode. I know those are good. Why is it not? Okay. There should be, I may be picking the wrong ones. Well, let me pick this one. I know this is definitely a good example here. Okay, so you need to have at least one input that is some vRealize or vCenter object type. Okay, so in Orchestrator you have things like VC host system, and just to show you, if we were to go to the API Explorer and we looked at VC something, you see all these different object types. But basically, we're looking for things like host system or virtual machine, you know, that kind of object. So the input type that is required so that when you do that mapping that we saw earlier, so there's virtual machine, for example, when we do that mapping that we saw earlier, when we were saying this workflow will run on virtual machine object types, and we added it to the action framework, that's how vRealize Operations knows what value to pass, you know, what vRealize Orchestrator is looking for that input. So that is definitely required. If it's not there, you won't be able to do the mapping and the execution of the workflow from that action menu. Furthermore, if you want to fully automate the alert, then you can't have any other inputs for the alert other than just that object type. There is an exception in the 3.0, and I'll show you what that is when we get over there. But because you can't handle user input if it's fully automated, right? The only thing that vRealize Operations knows to pass along with that action to the workflow is the impacted object, which could be a host, a virtual machine, data store cluster, etc. So if you want to fully automate it, in other words, have that action run when the alert triggers, then you can only have that single input of the vCenter object type. All right, so just be aware of that. Now I'm going to switch over to kind of like I said, the cooking show where I have everything running in the environment. And this is actually running on 7.5, so you'll be able to see some of the differences from the earlier version of this. But there's nothing really different in terms of how it's added or configured or anything like that. That's all pretty much the same. The administration page for where you add solutions in 7.5 is a little bit different, but it's not daunting enough that you need to really worry about that too much. So you can see all the configuration is the same. This is the 3.0 version, so nothing to be concerned about there. So the install part of that is the same, and when I go to dashboards and go to the orchestrator workflows overview, same kind of stuff here, the 4 different actions that we need to run for that. So in this case, I have configured everything in Orchestrator. I've configured the management pack. I've actually pulled in some of the workflows into the action framework. So we can go here and we can see based on the adapter type. I may have to filter this the other way actually to show the orchestrator adapter. So you can see, there are different workflows that have been already added in here. So all that is pretty much done and ready to go when you we're at the same state, in other words, that I left the other instance in. Okay, hopefully I didn't confuse anybody with that. So what we did add in on the orchestrator side, and let me actually to open. Need to open up that orchestrator client. So let me do that right now. What we did add, and this as you notice is 7.6. I'm using the legacy client here instead of the nice H5 client, which I really like. But I did find that there was a little bit of an issue with the presentation for the orchestrator out-of-the-box orchestrator workflows. that you need to run for the compliance stuff, and that's why I'm using the legacy client. So if anybody asks, I know that question's probably going to come up, it's like, why aren't you using the fancy new stuff? I did have, you know, some things just didn't quite look right, and I haven't quite figured out why yet. So just stick with, for this, if you're doing this or watching this and trying to follow along, just stick with the old Java client for now until we kind of get that worked out. But we also included, you know, in that out-of-the-box content, the workflows for remediation of the host violations of the vSphere security learning guide. That is located in this folder. So if you go in here, you'll see basically there's one action here, and it's apply host security configuration rules. And there are a lot of different helpers, okay, which you don't necessarily need to be worried about, but these are workflows that will run depending on what violations have been found, and also what you've configured it to automatically remediate. And what I mean by that is there's a configuration that you'll want to run, or you need to run initially for this, and the configuration does need to be run from the orchestrator client, just because the presentation is really complex, and so it doesn't render in vRealize operations at all. And because when we built this, we actually have a lot of dependencies on inputs. Depending on the answer you give for you know, different inputs, it'll show different sections in the presentation. So that's why you need to run it from here, and you'll see what I mean here in just a second. When I run this, it'll come up and it'll ask you, hey, which of the host security configuration items would you like to enforce? So you can see basically, you know, all the different you know, violations here, not violations, but recommendations for things like password policies, persistent logs, NTP, etc. Now, for most of these, if you click yes, that's all you have to do, right? For some of them, though, when you say yes, you'll see that there's another configuration that is added to that, or required input for that. So for something like, for example, NTP, if you want us to fix NTP automatically, or you want Orchestrator to do that automatically, then you need to give us, you know, the NTP servers. So, you know, I'll just put in a couple of my servers here. 173.5. Okay, so these are, you know, servers in my lab, and so then it knows, okay, now I will fix this for you, and these are the NTP servers that I will use, along with all the other, you know, settings that I will adjust in NTP, like making sure the service is set to auto start, making sure the firewall port is open for that. If you select no, then even if the workflow finds that there's a symptom that, you know, syslog is misconfigured or the password policy is not set correctly, then it's just going to skip it. Now, you will get a report that tells you what was fixed and what wasn't fixed, but this gives full control to the administrator if they don't want to just, you know, throw caution to the wind and have, you know, automate everything in their environment. I did a poll. I actually wrote these workflows that are included with this solution, and before I started writing them, I did a poll on Twitter and asked, like, would you want to enforce everything automatically, or are there selected things that you would enforce but not everything? And the overwhelming response was, I want to be selective in that. So that was kind of the way. If you want to select everything, you certainly can. The other thing that I ask people about is, would you like to be notified when this happens? So I'm glad that you fixed it, but I also need to get like an email telling me, hey, we found a problem and we fixed the problem, or we fixed some of the problems depending on what your answers are. So you need to configure their SMTP, your email options here. So you can include people on the to receive the email either by carbon copy directly or BCC. And then finally, we'll need to make some calls back, or at least one call back into vRealize operations to retrieve some additional information about the alert. So we'll want to know the VR ops IP address, and then a user that has the ability, that has API permissions to look stuff up in vRealize operations. So that's why that's there as well. So once you have all that stuff input, you can simply click submit, and those settings are saved for you in a configuration element. And if you want to come back in later and change them, you just run this workflow again. It'll look up your old settings and show you what they are, and then you can change those as need be. And so once you have that set up, you're good. You can go back to vRealize operations. Where did my vRealize? Oh, the first screen. You can go back to vRealize operations, okay, and then you're basically ready to go at that point. And by ready to go, I mean if I go to the alerts tab now, and I group by definition, and then I go and look at ESXi host is violating vSphere security guide version 6.5 or 6.7, and I see the list of all my little hosts here who are not properly configured, and I click on that. You'll see I have a run action here. You'll see I have all these symptoms that are impacting the host, and if I want to go ahead and run workflow of that master workflow to fix all or some of these, depending on the answers that I gave, then I can simply click on run action. Click on that. I don't have to fill any of this information in. You'll notice that there's this VROps alert ID input, and that is automatically added by vRealize operations for you. So if you remember, I talked about mandatory input is some vCenter object. You do have an optional input with the 3.0 version now, so that you can capture the alert ID itself and then use that to make a call back into vRealize operations to get more information. You can pull the alert, you can pull the symptoms. In this case, with these workflows, we're using it to pull the symptoms so we can determine which violations of the hardware or the security configuration guide we need to address. But you could use it to do any number of things at that point. Click begin action, it'll go off and can do its thing. If we go back over to Orchestrator, we should see, if the demo gods are with me on this fine evening, I can see that that's running down here. So my workflow is executing, and then eventually I'll get the nice green check mark. And then if I pull up my email, I should get shortly. I've got it in another screen here, so if you're not seeing anything, don't panic. Let's see, vRealize. Let me pull it. That one didn't quite come out. There's operations. Sorry, I'm going to pull this over to the other screen just a second, just to show you a good one that fixed a lot of symptoms. So this is an email. This is an example of the email you would get. So, we detected that this host had security configuration issues. We addressed the ones that you allowed us to address with that configuration that we looked at earlier, and those were successfully completed. Some of them we did not address. So, for example, we didn't enforce transparent page sharing. We didn't enforce the password policies for ESXi. And that's because you answered no in that configuration. A couple of these are just not enforceable, meaning we didn't even give you the option to automate enforcing those, just because the complexity of the decision process about what to do is really not amenable to automation, at this point in time. Or it could be because there's not an API available. So, for example, this CHAP, bidirectional CHAP, and the firewall, those are kind of a little complex, or there's complexity in those that require some additional decisions that are not easy to either capture in that configuration workflow that we ran or by user input. So we let those out for now. I think there's another one with SNMP. There's no API for SNMP today that I can use for this. You could do it through PowerShell, I know, but this is strictly using VRO workflows to accomplish that. So that's the only other one that we list as not enforceable. But at any rate, you know that we fixed some problems, and you know the problems that you have to go out and address yourself. So at least you have a nice little list of tasks here that you can forward on to, either the NOC or someone in the operational team to handle that for you. So I talked about running this like automatically. Well, how would I do that? If you go to the policy editor here, and you see that I have, my default policy. If I edit that, which by the way you can do directly from here, it used to be that you had to go to policy library and find it. This is another nice little Easter egg in 7.5, vRealize Operations Manager. If you edit the policy and you go to the alert symptoms and definitions, and then I find the easiest way I find to do it is click on this automate filter option, and what you can do is just say, yeah, if it's not enabled. So I just uncheck these two. Come on. There we go. If it's not enabled, there we go. Then you just come in here and you say, yeah, I want this to be automated. And what that means is if that alert definition has a recommendation that has an action associated with it, and you want it to run automatically, then you just change this from inherited to blah, 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 automate enabled. Sorry, this is so slow. I don't know why it's, yeah. So you do local, with the green check, and it'll do it. I won't do it for that one, but just to show you for the ones that the one workflow that we have that will run automatically for the host remediation for the vSphere security guide. Oh.
So John, we have a question that came in.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you have different compliance settings targets per cluster? Does that mean creating a specific VROPS policy per cluster with those alerts and symptoms?
Yeah, that would be the way to do it, quite honestly. So, you would need to create, custom group and then a policy to apply to that. So yeah, that would be the way to do it. One of the things that you could do also is we have custom compliance templates now in 7. which allow you, or 7.5, I should say, which allow you to create your own, compliance templates. So you could use those and then have an alert that triggers off of those specific compliance template alerts that you're interested in, and run these actions. So there's different ways to do it, but probably the easier way would be to just create custom groups and have policies for the specifics that you want. The problem that you may run into is, so let me get out of this. So anyway, this is where you come and make that action automated in policy. The problem that you may run into is that when you look at the alert definition here, I'll just pick this one and go to the alert definition. The alert definition itself has, all these symptoms in it. For example, slowly, hotel internet I'm dealing with here, so that's a problem. So you see all these symptoms. If you're not interested in, like, you have a cluster and you're like, I don't care, for some reason, I don't care about NTP. I don't know why you wouldn't, but you don't care about NTP for a particular cluster, then you'll need to copy this alert definition and then remove those symptoms, and then use that alert definition in the policy associated with the custom group that contains the host that you want to apply that policy to. Hopefully that makes sense. If anybody has questions about that, certainly follow up with me on Twitter. If I need to do a blog on it or something, I'm happy to do that. But that's probably the way that you would need to tackle that.
We've got one other question that's come in. Can you have multiple policies per cluster? So you can have a common policy for everything and specific policy for alerts for each cluster.
So you can. So if you look at policies, I should say, you'll notice that we have this default priority, and it's got 1,300 objects associated with it. And then we have these other policies, and you'll see the priorities on these. So, for example, all the objects may have the vSphere, they may, for one reason or another, or by default, the vSphere solution default policy applies to them. But then they may join a group, let's say, that has this host-based licensing policy with a priority of 1. And that policy is going to be the active policy for that host. But what you can do is, if you look at this, I'm not sure who set these up. Hopefully they did it the way I would have done it. Probably so. Yeah. So what you see here is I've got the default policy that I'm running, and then I have these child policies off of that. And the child policies basically say, I want to use everything in the default policy, but I'm going to change 1 or 2 things. I'm going to automate this particular alert, or I'm going to not use this alert. Instead, I'm going to trigger this different alert, that I just created with some fine tuning. And so that you can see here, if you look down at the locally defined settings, you can see that there are only 2 policy elements that were really changed. No alert definitions were changed, no symptom definition, metric properties. So what you would do if you want to do apply, the majority of the systems should follow the default policy, but then you want to tweak that and make specific changes for subgroups, this inheritance would be the way to do that. And then once you have them, then you could also rank those so that if an object has one or two or more policies that apply because of some group membership, then this ranking would determine which one of those policies would apply for that object. So it's kind of a two-step process. And again, happy to dig into this further, over Twitter. If I need to do a blog, happy to discuss it. But that's kind of the way that you would tackle that. So I know we're at the bottom of the hour. We've completed the hour, but I have time if we want to. If there are any more questions or anything like that, certainly happy to stay on and answer those.
The questions are all about the multiple policies and conflicts and in what order they all apply in. So
okay.
So I'm pretty sure that that's been covered. Got a lot of really good remarks on Twitter saying, Matt Crape saying he's going to be implementing this in his new home lab build.
Oh, great. Cool.
So Matt, I'm going to volunteer John. He will help you if you have any questions.
Yeah. And you know what? When you get it installed, if you do some cool things with it, I think you should do a brown bag too. That would be great to see. And that's one of the things, Tom, and I know you and I have talked about this, is like, I like having, all this capability is fine, but what I really like hearing is from like you and other customers who are actually using this and they're getting benefit and they're actually coming up with new and creative ways to do things, like you've done and some others have done. And if you can do that and also contribute, to our repository that we have for the workflows, and, however you want to do it, however I can be of help, certainly let me know.
Yeah. Graham Mitchell says it's going into his lab too. Rob says, thanks for the walkthrough.
Great.
All right. I guess with that, this has been vBrownbag. Thank you very much, John. This is a great walkthrough, and everything was awesome. So thank you.
Great. My pleasure. Thanks, everyone, and have a good evening.
Yeah. How would the people watching at home or recording, how would you recommend them contact you if they have any additional questions, feedback?
Twitter is fine. John D. Dias at Twitter, or DiasJ, DIASJ at VMware.com. So either one of those are fine.
All right, great. Well, thank you very much, and we'll see everyone next week.